these piers in, so I'll just say it now. But I think where we left off was just after tamping it, making sure that it's level. If it's not level, depending on how bad it is, you either take the whole thing out, put some gravel in, like whether you had to raise that side or that side, tamp it back down, put it back. Hopefully it's level. If not, sometimes we cheated a little bit and just lifted it up, threw some gravel in, kind of spread it around and put it back down if it was a little bit off. But I'd really recommend, as best you can, taking it out, re-grading it and tamping it, putting it back in. Once you have it all level, you're going to take your tape measure like we did earlier and double check that it's square. What I found to be, if it's just like a couple of eighths of an inch off, what I found to be a really good strategy is to just get your boot and kick it a little bit. And since it's so heavy, it'll stay level and it'll just move just a little bit. And I found that like the perfect tool to getting it like nice and exactly to the eighth of an inch of how you want it. Once you have your pier in, this is an important step. I found a lot of mistakes this way, was I wanted to make sure my whole row was level, because eventually my girders are going to run this way. So I really want these piers to be square with each other, not off this way. So what I did was I measured from this intersection out to where the top of this pier ran, made a mark, measured that distance and put the exact same distance on that side. And then what I did was I just ran a line this way. I ran a line along this whole line of 4 piers and just basically sighted it to make sure that this line, this pier, was even with the line, and just ran that all the way down. And I actually found a couple of mistakes that I had made where the row was a little bit off, even though the measurements are correct from the adjacent piers. So that's definitely an important step to take. But once you do that, all your piers should be square, level, and you can move on to the next step, which we're doing today, which is putting up the wooden posts. Okay, so the process for these posts is pretty straightforward. I used the level, a big piece of wood in the level, to find the highest point, because we had this surveyed and cleared and leveled, but it's still a little bit of a slope on the property. So I found the highest point, which was this one right here. And I measured exactly how high I wanted off the ground, which for us was about 18 inches, because we'll have a 8-foot girder attached to it, which will be about 26 inches, and we wanted it at least 24 inches off the ground.
You mean 8 inch? 8 foot.
We'll have a 2x8 girder, which is 8 inches, attached to this post. So we have this, which is 6 inches, this, which is hopefully around 18 inches, and that, which is 6 inches, which should get us enough clearance off the ground. Once I had this post, I just measured off that one, and I'll show you how we did that in a second, and just went from there and spread out. So hopefully this will be the lowest point of our floor, because it's the highest up off the ground. The rest of these posts will be a lot taller. As you can kind of see down there, some of them are starting to get a little bit taller because the plane goes lower. So now I'll show you, once we have our starter, how we get the next one done. What I found help was actually using these metal plates that go on top of it. Just to give it a nice even surface. Also helps with that bulge in the middle in case you can't get it all the way out. These are a son of a to get on. These are super annoying to get on. If these connectors are twisted even just a little bit, like, they'll just give you such a pain. I'll try and get this on for you guys so you can see. Sometimes I just use my hammer. And then these metal connectors, sometimes when you're doing that and tapping it down, the metal will bend inward and create like a bulge in the metal. So I just pull those back down and just hammer the edges to make sure that it's all flat. Once I do that, it's time to put my super big 4x4 post in. To the spot. I'll put these connectors back up just to give it a little more support so it doesn't fall over. So what I have done so now we have our post nice and settled there, and this is the one we're going to cut. So we're going to measure how far up the board we're going to make the cut, and to do that I'm going to take our already leveled cut and attached post, place this 2x4 on it, and have this level on top of it. And all I'm going to do, it's really simple, is just hold it up to here and move it up or down depending on where the level tells me. Once it's about level, and I'm going to make it a little bit high because I found that once you drill it in, make the cut, you lose just a tiny little bit. So I'm going to get it kind of right, not quite touching that line. But it's just a really slight, like you really want it pretty much level. It's just if you're gonna go in one direction, go a little bit tall because you can also sand it down. But basically level. And I'm just gonna mark with my pencil as I'm holding it, right on the bottom of that 2x4. Now I have my cut. I'm gonna bring this over to my cut station and make the cut. Okay, so here's how I'm gonna make this cut. I'm not a carpenter, so maybe you could look up your own video on how to cut a 4x4, but this is how I'm doing it. I don't have a square on me, so I'm using this post leveler, putting it down and setting up my blade so that it's just on the outside of the line that I want to cut, because the blade has a thickness to it. I think it's 10 millimeters. So this is technically where the blade is, this L, and I'm gonna just do one dash over, line that up with the pencil mark. I'm gonna hold this close to my board, and I'm just gonna make the first cut. Just like that. I'll flip it over because this blade isn't big enough to cut through the whole thing. Slot it into that mark, put this up against it so it's level, do the same thing. And one more time. You want to make sure that you don't have any pieces coming up. I have a tiny little piece that's a little bit high, so I'm just going to grab my sander and just take that nubbin off. Okay. So now we're going to take this back and make sure that it's level. Okay, so I have it set up back again, and you can see that I had it slightly up a little bit, and I was right, it's right smack dab level, which is great. Another thing I'm going to do, which is important to remember, is go to the perpendicular pier and do the same thing just to make sure that you're same level on all sides. And that looks good to me. So the next step is going to be screwing this into the metal connectors. Okay, this is the next step. Important to remember, we spent so much time getting these piers lined up that you don't want these to make a simple mistake of having your post not be in the exact center of your pier. So what I'm going to do is just check that on both ends there's equal distance of wood between these connectors, because these connectors are centered on the pier. So that looks good to me. The other thing I'm going to do is make sure it's not angled one way or another from the pier. So if you go from the top, just making sure that it's not twisted one way or another from the pier, and make sure you're not looking at that connector plate because that one gets twisted when you're putting it on. Look at the actual pier. So I think we need to twist a little bit that way, a little bit too much. And that looks good to me, diagonal-wise. Last step before you take it in is not to lose your level, and just make sure that you're level on all sides, and that looks good to me right Okay, and then we're just going to take our impact drill. The screws I'm using, I'll put in the video or in the comment section. I don't even know yet what kind of screws I'm using, but they're structural connector screws, number 10, 2.5 inches. And I'll just make sure I'm pressing down because I did a couple of them and didn't realize that I wasn't pressing down. It actually lifted off the plate a little bit. And so the only thing holding the house up would be these screws instead of the pier. So you want to make sure you're pressing down. Fill it in. Just make sure we're staying level because that can kind of knock it off course a little bit. Looks good. I'll do one on the other side. Make sure we're level. Looks good. And we'll just do the rest of the screws. Do one more check for level on either side. But it should be good. And we'll just repeat this process 23 more times. Surprise guest at the property. Baby girl? Girl? Is it girl? Have you checked? I haven't. Checking out the work. What do you think? We need an inspector. What do you think? Everything's set and level? Yeah, take a look around. Check them all. What do you think? You're gonna need to redo those. 5 inches deeper.
Your breath smells terrible.
Bye, Inspector.
Bye.
Thank you.
Free labor.
We'll call you again for the plumbing.